Hi guys, and welcome to this first video module on taking your mental pulse. Now, this is the most important concept that we're going to talk about over the coming weeks. Everything that we look at in this program is founded on this idea of expanding our knowledge of ourselves. And that starts with taking your mental pulse. What is taking your mental pulse? Taking your mental pulse is spending 5 minutes every morning, well, starting with 5 minutes, we'll expand it over the weeks, but it starts with taking 5 minutes every morning before we get distracted by the world. So before you switch on your phone, engage with work emails, watch or listen to the news, scroll social media, etc. It's about taking a physical journal and a pen and writing for 5 minutes at first everything and anything that comes up. Okay, now this is important. This is not journaling for the sake of journaling. We're going to come back to these mental pulses. You know, think of it as data that you're collecting, because we're going to look at trends in that data later on. I'm not going to introduce why yet or those concepts, because we want to keep it simple and straightforward. At this point, just know it's important, and we're coming back to this, and it's a first stepping stone that we're going to build upon. But taking your mental pulse is an observation of your inner monologue. How do you feel? What are you thinking about yourself? What are you thinking about the day ahead? How do you feel about that? Are you excited? Are you anxious? You can start in the physical body. It's often easier for us to think about aches and pains, whether we're tired, whether we're well rested. And when we start to think about whether we've got a headache or what we feel in our gut, then we get round to thoughts and emotions a little bit more. You know, if we do that head scan from the top of your head down, and you start to think about how you are, even if you start in the physical body with tightness in your shoulders, why? Why are you tense? If you get down to the level of the gut and you think about, why is there a knot in my stomach? Why have I got butterflies? What am I worried about? Then it takes you to that place. So if you're struggling to get started, start with the physical body. If you're the opposite to that, and it's like mental diarrhea pouring itself out onto the page, and that's my experience, it's perfectly normal. Being stuck and staring at a blank page, perfectly normal. Pouring out your heart and soul onto the page, perfectly normal. And everything in between. There are no wrong answers. There's no wrong way to do this. All you have to do is attempt to write for just 5 minutes every morning before interruption, before your external environment changes your mindset, puts you in a different headspace. We want to capture how you're thinking and feeling about yourself without any distraction. That's why we have to do it first thing in the morning. Any later than that, and life's happening, shit's going on, right? So we're capturing it early doors, first thing. Okay, why is this important? This is important because you are all here to achieve something. You're ambitious, you're driven people, and your time is precious. So I'm not here to take you through a series of modules that ultimately are quite interesting and might convey some additional knowledge on top of what you already possess and might create 1 or 2 or 3 new healthy habits for you. That's not good enough. We are aiming much bigger than that. You're aiming up. You want the life you deserve. You want to live as the person who you know you could be, without impediment, without limitation. And that's why taking your mental pulse is so important, because only by engaging in this exercise and then building it out with further mindset practices do we see what's in your way. And yeah, there are external environmental challenges that get in our way. but most of the time we get in our own way. And unless we see how and when, we can't do anything about it. Our behaviors don't happen by accident, and our behaviors dictate our outcomes in life. So if they're not happening by accident, why are they happening? They're happening because they're a product of the stories we tell ourselves. So I'm going to use a couple of expressions here that stand for inner monologue, the thoughts and emotions and the words you put round them inside your own head. Often subconscious, sometimes consciously thought out internally, but often subconscious. Subconscious most of the time. Self-talk's one of them, i.e. the language you use towards yourself, and belief, limiting story, limiting belief. So this idea that self-talk is part of a limiting story or of a serving story. A limiting story is a story that limits you. It limits your behavior and therefore your outcomes. A serving story serves you. It's going to create behaviors that, if you execute day in, day out, week in, week out, take you closer to your goals, help you achieve your goals, that adds up to that big picture vision for who you want to be and why. Okay, so we've got the level of story under behavior, and then we've got the level of belief under story. It all starts with belief. Again, belief comes in two stripes. You're either running a serving belief that runs a serving story, that creates serving behaviors, that gets you closer to your goals so you can achieve your vision. So it's a serving belief because it's beneficial to you for what you want. Or it's limiting because it's the opposite of that. It's limiting your potential to be who you could be, literally without limitation. Okay, these are the two concepts. Now I'm going to share a couple of slides with you guys. Where does this add up? Well, look, I've just outlined this idea that any outcome that we want to achieve in life, and you're all here to achieve certain outcomes because you know that stacking certain positive, beneficial, serving outcomes add up to you achieving your goals. And that achieving your 3-month goals, your 1-year goals, your 3-year goals add up to creating that life rich in meaning and purpose that's as big as you want it to be. Now, that life that you imagine for yourselves, that you desire for yourselves, that's you in free nature. And every time you do something good in service of that, along the way, over the coming months and years, that's you in free nature. Free nature is you at your best. It's you in your flow state. You're in the moment. You're not thinking about past. You're not thinking about future. You're having fun. You're content. You're learning. You're growing. You're doing something beneficial for yourself. You're doing something for your best self, as your best self. Or you're in limited nature. Now, if you don't choose, you're going to flip-flop backwards and forwards between the two at will. At your will, no, because you've resigned choice here. You're going to flip-flop forwards and backwards depending on what's happening in the external environment, depending on how you're getting triggered by the world. Now, that isn't choice, that isn't freedom. So in order that we can live a life free to be who we want, living why we want to live that way, we have to start to build in this recognition that our outcomes in life are a product of our behaviors, and that we can't consciously, logically will our behaviors all of the time because it's utterly exhausting. And there will always be something that comes along in life that flips the script for us, that disrupts us, that triggers us. So the only way we can create lasting behaviors for long-term mental and physical well-being is to think about the thoughts and emotions that underpin them. So the stories, are they stories that free us, or are they stories that limit us? Are they rooted in beliefs that free us, or are they rooted in beliefs that limit us? And that's what taking your mental pulse is. It's shining a light on those subconscious stories, on those subconscious beliefs, and starting to build out that picture. So you've got more awareness, you've got more perspective, so that we're not going from stimulus to response on autopilot, especially when we're thinking about limited stories and limited beliefs. You know, we hold beliefs about ourselves and about the world because we started to tell ourselves a story subconsciously, and we repeated that story so many times it became ingrained as a belief. So that is strong. That is hardwired. Now, our brains are plastic, so they can be rewired, but the channels that these stories have dug in our subconscious minds are deep because they're decades old. So if we've got any hope of avoiding them, changing them, upgrading them, just seeing them for what they are, which is an option other than ourselves, a path that we can choose to walk again, or we can choose to walk a different path. In order to see that, we've got to start actively trying to see it. You know, we can't spend a couple of moments a week daydreaming and reflecting on these things. We actually have to actively pursue it. Think of it as a muscle that needs to be trained in the gym. It's a skill that must be practiced. You know, skill that must be acquired. So, what we're talking about here, as I begin to summarize, is if we're unthinking, however good life is, something rubbish is going to come along, and it's going to trigger us, and it's going to trigger thoughts and emotions. It's going to trigger limiting stories founded in limiting beliefs, non-serving beliefs. And in order that we don't feel so rubbish about ourselves, we're going to escape into problematic self-soothing behavior. Whether we compulsively shop, whether we binge eat, whether we're gambling, whether we go and surf the internet for pornography, whether we drink, whether we smoke, whether we take drugs, whatever it may be, or whether we just obsess about a behavior that is potentially healthy in the right measure, but we go way too far with it. All self-soothing behaviors. And all you get is temporary relief and distraction. But it's followed by guilt, regret, self-loathing. You know, that deep, deep knowing feeling that you should have seen this coming. That you knew that that self-soothing behavior wasn't right for you. That you knew that the relief was only temporary. And that you knew you would regret it afterwards. You know, we've all been there. And does that leave you in a better place to deal with the initial issue that triggered you in the first place, or to deal with the next trigger that comes along? No, it doesn't. You get stuck in that downward spiral. But until we see our stories and appreciate which ones are serving who we want to be in life and which ones are limiting us, we've got no control over what stories we run, over which beliefs our subconscious mind is focused on. Whereas the more awareness we've got, the more perspective we've got, the more we can amplify those serving stories, the more we can continue to hardwire those serving beliefs about ourselves, so that when that trigger comes along, we have the awareness to make the choice between the serving story and the limiting story, between the story that frees you, the belief that frees you, and the story that traps you, the story that limits you, the belief that limits you. When you set yourself free in free nature, running serving stories founded on serving beliefs, your self-soothing behavior is beneficial. You take time to cook a good meal, you go for a walk in nature, you pick up the phone to a loved one, you go and do some work, you go and do a workout, you go and do some exercise, you meditate, you do some breath work, whatever it might be, things that contribute to lifelong wellness. Or you do absolutely nothing other than make a choice to not run that limiting story again, to not reinforce that limiting belief. That in itself is a healthy behavior, and it contributes to lifelong wellness. And it contributes to fun and contentment and growth and everything it is to be in free nature. And finally, on this last slide, that's because what we're doing here throughout the rest of the program is identifying your meaning and purpose, expanding your time in free nature, and limiting your time in limited nature by, yes, rewiring limited beliefs, but that will take care of itself if we stop choosing to run limiting stories. And in terms of choice, if we do nothing, then the choice invariably that gets made at the level of the subconscious mind is to default on the limiting story, is to default on the limiting belief. So this isn't something that anyone can escape. You know, we either choose to try to spend more time in free nature, to be who we want to be, to live a life rich in meaning and purpose, or we default to the lottery of flip-flopping between free nature and limited nature. And if we default to that, to the lottery, if we expose ourselves to the potential environmental triggers without any sort of resilience, without any sort of awareness, without any sort of perspective, we're destined to spend most of our life in limited nature, because life's a struggle and it's always going to throw rubbish at us. So if we don't actively do anything to look after ourselves, we'll live a limited life. Now, we go on in this program to talk about fundamentals on the right-hand side of this page, all these things that we can do at the level of the body that help support our mindset. But it starts first with taking your mental pulse, because these things are difficult on the fundamental side of things. In our modern culture, it's hard to take time to rest. It's hard to prioritize sleep. It's hard to just be properly hydrated. It's hard to eat at the same time and observe an overnight fast. It's hard to control portions, to remember to take your supplements, to slow down and eat mindfully. These things are tough, right? And when life throws rubbish at us, we'll default back to our limited nature if we're not working on it. And so all of the fundamentals go out the window. So this is why we start with taking your mental pulse. As a reminder, I'll stop sharing now. As a reminder, 5 minutes each and every morning before you encounter the world, before the distraction of work and media and everything else that's going to take you out of that early morning mindset, out of that headspace where you've just woken up and you're seeing your thoughts and emotions as clearly unhindered as you're going to throughout the day. Okay, any questions, give me a shout. And remember, this is a really important step. Whether you're stuck staring at a blank page or whether you're pouring out your heart and soul and worried about what you're seeing, that's perfectly normal. And everything in between is perfectly normal too. Okay, just get some journaling done for, at this point, 5 minutes every morning. Well done. Well done for making a start, and good luck with it all.